Bob Bugert joins us today on In Focus here on NCW Life. Bob is our Chelan County Commissioner representing District 2.
That's correct.
Which is mostly Upper Valley, including some parts of Wenatchee, but mostly Kashmir, Monitor, Shaston,
all the way up to
Leavenworth,
Plain.
all the way up to Lake Wenatchee.
That's correct, yes.
Pretty big area.
Yeah, Commissioner Kevin Overbay and Doug England and I have vigorous debates. Probably our biggest debate is who's got the best county, or excuse me, the best district within the county, and I think I win pretty easily on that debate there. Yeah, it's a great area, great people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wanted to touch base with you on a number of projects that you've been dealing with specific to your district.
Sure.
I think the most immediate project I'd like to talk about is the West Kashmir Replacement Project. And I'll let you kind of give us a status report on that because you're getting close to that period where you're going to be opening up some contract bids.
Yes, that's
for
correct.
Construction on that.
Yeah, that's correct, Steve. Yeah, that at this time we're scheduled to have the bid openings on the 28th of January, which is just next Tuesday, and that is a little bit delayed there. We had to do a couple contract addenda related, or not contract, design spec addenda, so that when the primary bidders were looking at the documents there related to what needed to be done, they had some clarification that they needed about, now is this what you exactly wanted in this design, or is that? And it really helped out. It's a kind of an ongoing dialogue between our Public Works Department and the potential bidders about specifically what it is we're looking for. And so we did an addenda last week. We are actually releasing another one today to provide some clarification to the potential bidders. And there could be another one coming out this Friday. But all things look pretty promising that on the 28th we'll be able to get the ball rolling on that.
You say you have some potential contractors out there that might be interested
Yes.
in the project. What kind of interest? Can you share that?
Yeah, well, there's. I was just chatting with Eric Pearson this morning regarding it, and he's given us very frequent updates. And this is a huge project, Steve, as you well know. They've got at this time, I believe, 21 prime bidders that are interested in the project, which is very heartening for us. That we've gotten a lot of indications through Eric's work within the Public Works community statewide that the environment is really good for us to be releasing this, that we believe we'll have some very competitive bidding going on with this. And I'm really glad to see that there's some local contractors, prime contractors that will be hopefully submitting their bids. There'll be a lot of subcontractors, Steve, that certainly will be local, so that it will really provide a great benefit to our community.
Well, the scale of this project is huge. Maybe you can give us some perspective on that.
Yeah, if I can. So what we're talking about is the old Goodwin Bridge, and now we're naming it more appropriately to be the West Kashmir Bridge. And if you think about that bridge, it just goes over the river itself and the Burlington Northern Railway there. And in order to have the appropriate height to get over Burlington Northern, it's got to be pretty tall clearance. And so it's very steep going up and very steep going down. Mm-hmm. And it makes it very difficult for our freight trucks to be able to handle that. Plus the fact that obviously it is an aging facility there.
And I suppose with the new economic development that's occurring in Kashmir, that makes that even more necessary. Huh?
Exactly. Yeah, it's
Crunch
going to
pack,
be
and then with the other stuff that's going on with the port district.
And with the port property there, yes. So it's a great boon for our ability to move freight out of that area, and it is really going to be able to accommodate that very well.
It also kind of revises, I think, the traffic pattern.
It will.
On the other side of the highway as well.
Yeah, it will. So this particular bridge, it will actually go over Burlington Northern Railway. It'll go over the river and then go over Highway 2 itself. And there'll be a roundabout on the Hay Canyon side of Kashmir there, on the what would be the north side of the Highway 2 bridge.
Actually, there'll be an overpass then.
There'll be an overpass that spans that entire distance. And the reason why that is being done is because it allows for the appropriate grade
Right.
and the height to be able to get that kind of clearance.
Okay.
And so it is a major undertaking. And as you and I discussed prior to getting online here, is that this is, as far as monetary value, Steve, this is the largest project that Chelan County Public Works has ever taken on.
What is the estimated engineer's estimate? on
The engineer's estimate is somewhere right around $23 million for
goodness.
this project. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And so we are very hopeful, Steve, that given the competitive bid environment and the fact that we're getting early out in the season here, the construction season, with these bids, that we will be able to get some good response and be able to get this within budget.
Should be able to get some good sales tax revenue out of that as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, we certainly have thought about that. That's for sure. Yes, and that is a
Another
great
project
benefit.
you've been involved in at the county, and we'll switch topics here. Again, we're talking with Bob Bugert with the Chelan County Board of Commissioners. Is the vacation rental regulation
Yeah.
process? You're trying to set new regulations to kind of, I guess, address some of the downsides to vacation rentals involving some of the nuisance impacts to neighborhoods.
Yeah, I'd be glad to talk about that, Steve. You know, Steve, since I started my work here with the commission about a year ago, this and forest health, short-term rentals and forest health have really been the two big issues that I've been focusing a lot of my time on. And certainly the short-term rental one is quite a challenge to come up with something that really meets the needs of the people that have expressed concerns about the impacts of short-term rentals in their communities and in their neighborhoods, but also to support that industry because it is an important, viable industry in our tourist-related communities, that being primarily Leavenworth and Chelan. And there is lots of dialogue going on about how to appropriately do it, and we are really spending a lot of time listening and coming up with an approach. But I think the time has come now that we need to really take some steps forward related to that. What had transpired, Steve, is that at our request, our community development department, the ones that come up with the specific code, they looked at how other communities had approached short-term rentals, and they drafted some code. We went through a series of public hearings, both the county commission and then our county's planning commission, to get people's input on how that code would play out. And basically, the decision that the planning commission made and the ultimate recommendation that they gave to us, the county commission, was that we're on the right track, but what is down on paper was just not practical. It would be very hard to actually address some of the issues related to impacts to local communities from inappropriately managed short-term rentals. And I do want to stress that, Steve, is that there are, in my experience working with folks here, there are some very conscientious and professional short-term rental managers out there.
Usually the few rotten apples that spoil the bunch.
Yes,
as they
sir.
say.
Yes, sir. That is really the challenge, and about how to come up with appropriate regulation, if you will, that really addresses some of those folks that are not as respectful to neighborhoods or communities as many of those that are operating professionally. So.
Let me just ask you, what is the overall impact of vacation rentals to, let's say, Chelan County's economy? Obviously, you're able to collect lodging tax through that activity. Is it a significant part of your economic income?
There's some lodging tax there, and certainly the state gets a business tax related to that. That really is a benefit to the state.
It is a growing industry.
It is a growing industry, yeah. And but we certainly have heard enough from our local communities, particularly Leavenworth, Plain, Kashmir, and Manson. Those areas that one would expect there's a high percentage of short-term rentals, that it does really affect the some of the issues that are really a little bit more difficult to manage. Certainly there's the the very tangible things, which is noise, trash, parking, trespassing, things like that. Those are easy, relatively easy for us to come up with code to regulate. But it's the less tangible concerns that many people have raised as far as what it does to the community, how it affects the neighborhoods, workforce housing issues, housing affordability, things like that, that really are a little bit more challenging for us to address.
Oh, so you're saying that vacation rentals has an impact on the cost of housing?
There is that assertion that is out there, yeah. And
interesting.
so that's what we need to do. We need to validate those assertions.
And
We
how are
need
you
to
going to do
address-
that? How are you
How we
going
do that?
Yeah.
A lot of it, I think, Steve, would be really looking at other communities, how they have addressed it, and if there are any heuristic data out there that really addresses that in other communities, how to look at that here, and whether or not it is a valid assertion, and then whether or not how we address that, if indeed that is the case.
So you've hired a consultant, as I
Yeah,
understand?
so
to
what
do-
we've done, at the recommendation of some of our planning commission members, we hired Burke Consulting, and they have got some experience working with other groups, other jurisdictions, on coming up with what appears to be fairly practical and doable approaches for dealing with short-term rentals. And so they're going to come up with some draft code in conjunction with our community development department that, again, we're going to run through our planning commission, have them deliberate on that, look at whether or not this is something that is indeed good for our county, and then they will make an ultimate recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. And then Doug England, Kevin Overbay, and I will be able to deliberate on that appropriately.
I'm sure you'd like to get something on the books before the next vacation season.
Yeah, that would be our ideal. Whether or not we can actually pull that off, Steve, I don't know. We did emphasize to Burke Consulting that we would like to place this as a priority, and so that we are working diligently on that. We clearly know that there are folks out there that are frustrated with the what they perceive as a relatively slow action by the county, and I recognize that and I respect that criticism.
From both sides?
Yeah, in some respects from both sides, yes. And having this uncertainty is good for neither side of the spectrum there. And so we really need to provide some kind of certainty to folks. And but we really want to make sure that we do this well, Steve, and that we are as inclusive and as transparent as we possibly can. And that's been a real challenge, And but if one thing I could say is that Doug and Kevin and I are pretty committed to working on this and to coming up with what we hope will be a reasoned approach for this. Yeah, so we'll keep you posted on that. I'm sure you'll be hearing plenty more as
I'm
time
sure we
goes
will
on.
be.
Yeah.
Again, we're talking with Bob Bugert with the Chelan County Board of Commissioners. One final item I wanted to bring up
Yeah.
during our chat today, and that has to do with your trip to Olympia later today.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to be going over there with Kevin Overbay, is it?
No, with Doug England.
Doug England,
Yeah,
Commissioner
yeah.
England.
Yeah, Kevin has to stay back. He's really doing a lot of work related to the opportunity zones.
Oh boy, as we found out last week.
Yeah, and he's a dynamo related to getting work done there.
Got to
And
get
so
to work
this-
on his Malaga Mercado, huh?
one of many projects he's got going on. He's got a whole portfolio of big ideas.
So anyway,
but he's got to stay back. Doug and I are going over to Olympia to meet with our legislators, and we're actually going to meet with staff from the governor's office, related primarily to this issue related to legacy pesticides, Steve, which is something we really need to be very proactive about. And that what I'm talking about is, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even earlier than that, lead and arsenic were used as a
contaminated soil.
it was used as a pesticide, and it has left in some locations, some contaminated soil. And we have not there's quite a bit of uncertainty there as well as to where these contaminated soils are
And the level of risk that
and
it
the
poses.
level of risk, primarily the level of risk. I'm glad you brought that up. And so the Department of Ecology, at our urging and the urging of many others, is assembling a work group that's comprised of a broad spectrum of expertise and interests to work on that, to come up with a practical, reasoned solution. And so Doug England will be our point person for that. He and I are going over to have that dialogue with some of the governor's staff related to that, and to make sure that this is indeed placed as a priority for the Department of Ecology.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's an issue that bears watching, definitely,
It does.
because it affects
does.
quite a bit of property
It affects
here.
a lot of people. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, I want to thank you for stopping by and sharing your expertise with us today, and look forward to future meetings.
yeah,
I
it's
think
always good to
next
chat
up, we'll
with
be
you, Steve.
talking with our 3rd District Commissioner, Doug England,
Doug.
in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Well, it's always a great opportunity to visit with you, Steve. I do appreciate it. Yep.
And we thank you for joining us for another edition of In Focus on NCW Life. I'm Steve Hare.